Welcome back to another episode of the Retirement Insights Podcast with Jim Musgrave. I'm James Anderson, joined with Jim Musgrave from Musgrave Financial Solutions. Jim, we're carrying on the conversation today of withdrawing money from your retirement. We talked last time about the probability approach and how that's maybe the most common approach that people take, but not necessarily the smartest approach that people take to pulling money out of their retirement. And today we're going to talk about the safety first or the flooring approach. So let's dig into that. Tell me a little bit about this safety first approach and how you guys are using it with your clients.
Yeah, no, that's a great thing. And just kind of recap a little bit from the last podcast. When it comes down to pulling money out, there are two opposing philosophies on how to construct a retirement income plan. You've got what we call the probability-based approach, which is a very investment-centric approach where you're essentially selling shares of your portfolio to generate cash to put in your checking account. Okay. And we call it the probability-based approach because there are variables such as markets going up and down and typically the probability approach, that person who's very investment centric is, in theory, comfortable with about a 90% probability of success. Okay. The safety first person, this philosophy is different because they feel listen, I don't feel comfortable with a 90% probability of success. That 10% really kind of makes me nervous. As the analogy, would you get on a flight that has a 90% chance of landing safely? It'd make me a little nervous. So the safety first person says, hey, listen, I'd feel more comfortable if I had my basic income, my basic expenses covered by guaranteed income. And there are three different types of annuities. You have Social Security, which is one of the biggest annuities. You've got pension plans. That's another type of annuity. And you also have income annuities that are offered through insurance companies. By the way, they're all doing the exact same thing. They're literally pooling millions of lives, and they're spreading that risk over a large pool. So that's essentially what an annuity is. Is that, again, anyway, I won't go into all that stuff, but if you want to learn more about annuities, if you go to my website, jimmusgrave.com, and go to the annuity page, there's actually a recorded video called Annuities 101. We talk about 5 different types of annuities, and I got all sorts of stuff on there. So I don't want to get into annuities in detail so much on this episode, but I just want to kind of share with you that the concept is that we raise your floor higher to cover those basic expenses. Okay.
And real quick, as you say floor, can you explain what that means?
Yeah. So when I'm talking about the income floor, so there's, as I mentioned before, there's 3 different types of annuities. There's public annuities, which are Social Security, pensions, and Social Security. It's guaranteed income coming from a source. All right. So let's say, James, you and your wife retire, and I'm going to make up a number. Let's say between both of you, you've got $5,000 of income that's coming in from Social Security. Social Security is a pension. So you know that you've got $5,000 a month coming in from guaranteed income that has nothing to do with your investment accounts, okay? And so, in this approach, so let's say I'm going to make it up. Let's say you need $10,000 a month to live on. Social Security is going to cover $5,000, and now you've got to cover the remaining $5,000 a month coming from your investments. Well, maybe that $10,000 a month of living expenses, maybe not all that is essential. Maybe $8,000 is essential, and $2,000 is more of, hey, I may want to go on vacation or do some fun things here and there. So what the idea is with this is that you're taking these income annuities or pensions or Social Security, and you're raising that floor higher. Okay. So I want you to think about this conceptually. If you needed 10 grand in my example, and you've got 5,000 coming in from pension, you need to cover $5,000 a month, let's say, from your investment portfolio. So you're putting a lot of pressure on your investment portfolio to fill in that five grand. And you may not feel very comfortable being that aggressive, because what we, remember we talked about in our last episode that there's something called sequence of return risk. So what happens if we have a bear market recession? That could accelerate the depletion of our accounts. That's not good. So the larger the gap that we have to rely on our portfolio, that's just putting a lot of pressure on that. But if we could shrink that gap from 5,000 to maybe 3,000 or 2,000, and so we only have to take out maybe $2,000 or $3,000 a month from our investments, that gives us a greater risk capacity, our capacity for risk in a portfolio in retirement. So hopefully did I explain the floor? We're just trying to raise that floor of guaranteed income. That's basically, I think, what you were asking about.
Yeah, and I think that answers it for people that would be listening to this. They often have that question of what does that even mean?
Sure. But kind of going back to annuities, again, annuities are one of the most misunderstood products that we have. But because annuities pool large groups of people, and technically, the technical word is called mortality credits. An annuity is the only product that can guarantee lifetime income over 1 or 2 lives, even if that account value drops to 0. So, in what we're talking about in this kind of approach, we're talking about annuities that actually have an income rider that's guaranteed either 1 or 2 lives. That regardless because think about this: if you're taking money out of your 401k or Vanguard account or Schwab account or Fidelity account or whatever account you got, there's no guarantee that you're not going to run out of money, because you could spend it all. There's all sorts of stuff that happens. But with an annuity, again, it's the only product that will guarantee, that you will not run out of money you will not run out of income, even if that account value goes to 0. So that's a really important characteristic that annuities have that other investments don't have. So, philosophically, everybody's going to have different advisors are going to have different philosophies on this. My personal philosophy is that everybody should have at least 2 sources of guaranteed income in retirement. Now, I'm in the DC area. There's a lot of federal employees. My wife is a federal employee. So, in my family, we'll have my Social Security, my wife's Social Security, and her pension plan, her FERS. So that's going to raise our income floor. But many people don't have a pension plan. So if you don't have a pension plan, then the other alternative is an income annuity from these various insurance companies and different products. Okay, so that's philosophy. We feel pretty strongly about that. And as I mentioned, you can go to our website and read more about annuities if you like. But ultimately, and again, I'm just kind of recapping what we kind of talked about in the last episode, is that the probability-based thinkers feel that, again, a 90% chance of success is acceptable. And the safety first investor doesn't feel comfortable with that 10% of things not going well. So again, we're just trying to cover those basic expenses with guaranteed income. And that's sort of what the safety first approach is. So let's say you and I were working together, and I would say, James, okay, I want you to figure out your expenses that you think you're going to need, which basically is going to represent your lifestyle. Okay, you put in your mortgage, gas, insurance, food, whatever it is. Okay, now that's going to be a certain dollar amount. All right, well, what happens if you've got a health issue? And what happens if you lose a job? What happens if you need long-term care, and now your expenses just increased $6,000 to $10,000 a month per person? Now all of a sudden, what we just assumed in our planning of needing X amount of dollars a month, it's not that, because now you got these additional expenses tied to that, which puts even so. And what you said was exactly right. So there's good timing and there's bad timing that we have no control over. So if all of a sudden this stuff kind of hits us, and now we're in a bear market recession and we got all these extra expenses, that could be really tough. I actually just got this is kind of some of a sad story. I've got a client, mid-70s, and she doesn't have much left in her IRA. She was retired teacher, so she's got Social Security and a pension, and she was in the hospital. And make a long story short, now she has to sell her house and go into assisted living. And she goes, Jim, I need $50,000. Well, she didn't. She had less than $100,000 in her IRA, which all of a sudden, that doesn't leave much more wiggle room. And so at that point, would you apply for Medicaid? So there's things like that can happen. I mean, life happens. If you're, if you have elderly parents and been through that, you see what you go through. So it's important to understand that the amount of income that we project in our retirement planning, we just need to understand that there's some other expenses that primarily have to do with health that can really, add to those expenses and cause, real problems down the road.
Yeah.
But my point is that, if you have limited resources and we're looking and we're doing projections and we're saying, listen, this couple's not going to make it. Well, what you can do is that you can actually put a little bit more money into the annuity. So if they do run out of money, at least that income floor is higher and it's guaranteed over the life of the second spouse. So if you're underfunded, and unfortunately, I come across situations like this where it's like, guys, you're not going to make it.
I mean, the reality is there are many, many, many variables that will impact your retirement. And when you're entirely dependent on a market-based approach, it can be very detrimental when things go awry.
Yeah, and that, as you talk about, the image that's coming in my head is the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Basic food, shelter, and it kind of moves up from there. And I kind of look at that in the context of retirement income. Let's make sure that our basic needs of like food and shelter are covered.
Yeah.
So anyway, I keep on relating back to this, but again, we're trying to have consistency in an income, in a world of lots of volatility. And so, as we kind of talked about in the other, podcast about the probability-based approach, one of the biggest risks is sequence of return risk, which is, when, especially in your first few years of retirement, when you're pulling money out and now you're in a bear market recession, it's not your fault. It's just what the markets are doing. So one of the best ways to, address sequence of return risk is through the probability-based approach, because for two reasons. One is that, especially if you're going to use something like a fixed indexed annuity that has your principal protected, what are you doing? So you're putting X amount of dollars of the portfolio into, so let's say, a fixed indexed annuity with an income rider, then your principal's protected. So you're taking whatever's in that annuity, you've taken market risk off the table. Okay. And the second point is, we just talked about, you also are addressing longevity risk, which is really important. So anyway, as we talked about with the probability-based approach, you have to be thinking more about safe withdrawal rates, how much can I pull out, and so forth. And the other thing is that, and I can actually calculate this. When you actually have the probability-based approach, what you do is that you say, I need X amount of dollars, and you divide it by the safe withdrawal rate, and that's going to give you a certain amount of capital that you're going to need. So, for example, let's say a couple, they're both 65, they want to withdraw $50,000 a year at age 65 to fill their gap. All right. So they would actually need a portfolio of about $1.25 million to be able to take out $50,000 a year, according to the 4% rule, with a 90% probability of success. Okay. So let me just kind of recap what I just said. So in my example, if you had a 65-year-old couple want to take money out of $50,000 a year, they need a $1.25 million portfolio in order to have a 90% chance of not, running out of money. Okay. Now, we actually ran some rates where if the same couple put a million, let's say, basically $1,054,852, which is kind of funny. So we actually ran actual illustrations recently. We could actually generate $50,000 of annual income guaranteed for both lives, which also gives you 100%, probability of success. So what you realize is that most people just think about the annuities in terms of, hey, guaranteed income. What they don't realize, and this is, by the way, I learned this from Andy Robertson, who we're going to have on there doing the Social Security stuff. What I learned from him is that the amount of capital necessary to generate X amount of dollars is going to be less with an income annuity than it would with a probability-based approach, because you got to deal with safe withdrawal rates. And you also have all that ups and downs, and you also have a 90% probability of success versus 100% probability of success. So that was another thing that people don't realize that I think is really important, is the amount of capital necessary to generate the income is oftentimes less with the annuities. So anyway, I mean, just to kind of wrap things up a little bit, what's important is that when we're doing planning and we're trying to figure out the distribution planning, we talk about taxes a lot in this podcast. And in order to do, all we're trying to do is make assumptions and projections in the future. And if our income is going to be very, very volatile from year to year to year, it makes planning a lot more challenging and less accurate. So that's why we like income predictability. And one way we can do that is through, income annuities using the safety first approach. And again, another big one too. So James, let me ask you this. What is the biggest fear that people have in retirement?
Oh, I would say that hands down, it's probably running out of money.
I talked about that my client meeting just recently, the dinner, and it was just like, when you go through a bear market recession, there's all sorts of emotions that are there, and that causes investor mistakes.
Yeah.
So when you have an approach like this and you have that consistent income, the chances are you're not going to panic, sell a bunch of stuff in your portfolio, and underperform the markets because of your timing was off. Okay. So typically my clients have gone through the process with me and have kind of taken this approach. My phone doesn't ring when the markets dive 10, 20, 30, 40%, because we already have a strategy. We know exactly what we're going to do, and we've already planned for it. So I think that's super important. So again, just to kind of recap things, all we're doing with the safety first approach is that we're building a guaranteed income floor to meet basic expenses. And we're just talking about taking a sliver of your current portfolio and put it into something like this. We're not talking about doing the whole thing. And even beyond that, from a suitability point of view, the insurance companies don't like to see more than 50% of a portfolio in an annuity anyway. So we're just going to be doing a little sliver of the overall portfolio. And again, we're just going to cover your discretionary. I mean, the discretionary expenses are basically going to be kind of covered from your portfolio and those sorts of things. And anyway, it's a great way to address the longevity, sequence of return risk, and just makes the retirement income a little more predictable, which makes planning much easier. So, and finally, it just requires less capital to produce the same amount of income, based on safe withdrawal rates. So anyway, if you wanted more information on this stuff, these are some great resources. I got a lot of this stuff from Wade Pfau, the Safety First Retirement Planning, also the Retirement Planning Guidebook. And so if you want to dig into this stuff, we also have some resources that you can go to learn more about this.